get some vocabulary words going here. And so our first word that we're going to talk about is what is a relation compared to a function. So a relation is when we're comparing any two things. So I'm going to go ahead and write that over to the side here. It is when we are comparing any two things. Okay? And again, just because we're comparing them doesn't mean that it's going to be a function. Or what we're talking about is we're not going to be able to write an equation to compare one versus the other. So just comparing any two, it's a very broad definition there. So when we talk about how relations are written, they are a set of ordered pairs because we are comparing two things. And so they can actually be shown in four different ways. So one is a table. Okay, that would be like your T table. We could do mapping. We can do a graph. Or we might do an equation. And for the most part in here, the one that we're going to focus on is the graph and the equation once we get to going. The other thing too is your set of values, your X values that you have, those are called our domain. And we're going to be doing domain and range all year long. So your Y values are your range. Now, other words that might be used for domain, I'm going to put them over here to the side. So we also refer to domain as the independent variable. Okay, you might hear it referred to as the input. And then, of course, the X value. Okay, so domain, independent, input, X, any of those are our domain. Then we have our range, which would be then the dependent variable. It is the output, or it is the Y. Okay, so just be aware that we could refer to domain in multiple ways. So a relation with distinct points, so let's talk about that. So we're talking about when we're graphing, okay? When we're graphing, if it has distinct points, in other words, we're going to say that they are countable, okay? I can count exactly how many points they are. That kind of a graph is called a discrete graph. Then if the dots are connected, okay, and that makes a line or a curve, and I should put in here also it could make a segment, okay, a line segment on there, then that is called a continuous graph. Okay, so you're going to be able to have to be able to recognize which ones are continuous and which ones are discrete. And that's going to help you then find that domain and range. So a relation, again, is in which each element of the domain paired with exactly one element of the range. Now, that should be a function, sorry about that, a function, not a relation, okay, a function. Okay, so what we're saying here is you have one X for every, let me back up, one Y, sorry about that, one Y for every X, okay? So your X is only going to go to one Y. So an example of that would be if we had a set of points, okay, and those could be something like 0, 1, 5, 2, 3, 4, okay, just a set of points. And what you see here is that 0 goes just to 1, 5 goes just to 2, and 3 goes just to 4. Okay, so that would be a function. An example that it would not be a function is if I had 0, 1, 5, 2, 0, 3. Okay, so in this case, 0 goes to 1, but 0 also goes to 3, and that makes it not a function. Okay, not a function, because again, 0 goes to more than one thing. Now, that's if you're going to look at if you've got a table or mapping notation, that's what you're going to look at. But if you have a graph, what you're actually going to be looking at is what we call the vertical line test, and you may have heard of that before. And we usually will just write VLT as our abbreviation as our proof. But if we have a graph, it must pass the vertical line test. So an example is if I have a line and I go in and I draw a vertical line, I can only hit in one spot for each vertical line. So that would be a function. Another function that we have might be if we're looking at, because we've been solving absolute value problems. So an absolute value is a V. But again, if I go and I draw a vertical line, I'm only hitting in one spot. So both of those would be functions. Now again, for this year, pretty much except for circles and ellipses, everything we will talk about or graph in here is a function, okay? Once we get past this test, or this section here, then we really want to just focus on the functions. Okay, an example of a graph that would not be a function would be a circle, as I said. A circle or ellipse, those would be examples that would not be. So if I drew a vertical line, you see it hits in 2 points. Therefore, it is not a function. Okay? So that is your vocabulary that we're going to be using throughout this unit.